Well, hi, good morning. Thanks so much for joining me here in my shop. Today is January 24th, another very cold day outside. Some snow coming. So I ended the last video having done the maintenance activities that this record player required on the top. And I think it's worthy of doing a little test here to see how it's working at this point. So if I flip it over and take a look at the parts underneath and do some lubrication activity there, I'm sure. But for now, I think we can give this a test go anyway. We'll see what happens. There we go. Okay, this is unlocked. Set the speed to 33, and again I'm going to want to catch this before it touches down on the platter. Well, you know what? I'm going to stop right away. I'm going to go and find a record that we can try this with. There we are. That's better. A record. What record should it be? I gave the record player a bit of a dusting, so I've just grabbed a record. We're not going to listen to this, but mostly I'm putting this on here for, to check the mechanical operation of the record player and to make sure if the needle does set down, it's setting down on a record. But I picked it. Chicago. What is the #1 song here? It must be this one here. Does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really know what time it is? Yeah, it's 9:45. Okay, I'm going to plug them in. So I wouldn't be surprised if this works really quite well at this point. There we go. Power's on. So first I'm just going to try to move the lever to just a manual and not engage the auto part. Just to that's not very good at all. Okay, so major traction problem going on here. Hey, how did that happen? Shouldn't have happened. How did that happen? That should not have happened. So motor's running, almost no traction. So, uh-oh, did I grind that wheel down too much? There we go. Yeah, what's going on here? So it may not have started at the natural starting point, and that's why it's kind of misbehaving a bit, or there's other problems. That was not very good at all. That was not very good at all. That was way worse than I expected. Now let's trigger the velocity sensor here. Okay, watching the slowdown of the platter. Yeah, look at that. That's the high point or the hard point. Point of maximum dynamic pressure. And also may take a few times around to kind of... Ooh, that didn't sound very good either. Just can't get over the hill. Now probably if we try this at 45, it'll work. And just because of the additional momentum that'll be in the platter. Sounds like a railroad train. Oh my gosh, that's not very good at all. So you can see it went right past the high point. The momentum just threw the mechanism past. Ooh, that's terrible. So that is what I was telling you about the kicker and the catcher and all that stuff. That's what you're hearing. Can't say I've ever heard a record player sound quite that bad. Let's do this a little slower. It's a little better. Maybe I moved it in too far, too quick. Is this guy operating at all? We'll now push the auto. We're just going to watch this. Yeah, it's doing its thing. Almost stalled. Stalling can be caused by a couple other things, not lack of traction, so we're going to test the traction. And the way you do that is just put drag on the platter, just with your finger. That's bad. That's very bad. I hardly put any pressure on it. It came to a stop. I can turn it backwards even. So we have some traction problems to deal with that intermediate wheel, which I ground down. So it had to be ground down far enough to get rid of the bumps in it. And maybe I reduced its diameter just enough so it's... this isn't stopping. That's probably from a sticky lever underneath. Okay, so we'll just carry on, not worry too much about any of this kind of stuff. Not until everything's done, then we can start worrying. I'm going to take the platter off because it'll fall off if I don't take it off. I'm going to want to flip this whole thing onto its back here. So I mentioned it may be necessary to tighten up the spring. That could be part of it. This mechanism may not be releasing properly. I don't know. If even though I've done all kinds of these record players, understanding precisely what every little part is doing is a little tricky. They're all a little bit different. So I've got this clamped. Maybe just to increase the safety here and or reduce the chance of damaging something, I'm going to take this right off. We still don't know if this works at all. Okay, now flipping this over is a little awkward. Awkward in the sense that you got to get it balanced on here so it's secure. What's going on there? Okay, I see what's going on. Let's try it this way. That's better. That's good. That'll do it. Okay, what do we got going here? Let's see. Looks pretty dust free. That's a good thing. You can see the lubrication here. It looks fairly lubricating. This looks, well, it's all turned dark and black. This is the mechanism that adjusts the height of the intermediate wheel to control the speed. The motor here has a lower bearing that can be exposed, oiled, and put back together, which we'll do at some point. Motor doesn't seem to be in any kind of trouble though. This is the cord that appeared to be added, but I don't think it's added. I think this is a new record player that was installed in the console, and it came with this cord. I think that's the story there, because this looks all professionally done here. Just looks right. You see the green wire catching the frame of the motor, catching the deck, this big piece of metal here. And then, I can't quite see it, there's another screw down to the deck just like that, and this green wire becomes this green wire, which heads down to the grounding of the amplifier. Okay. Got some foam in here. Foam typically doesn't survive. This is good. This foam is fine. But foam, quite often, foam in anything at this age can turn into, well, I don't know what you would call it. Turn into dust, basically. So there are some mechanisms in here that should not be lubricated. This one here. This is the part of the record player that involves pushing the velocity sensor forward. This is knocked forward by the tone arm. Let's see if I can rotate the tone arm a little bit. Here, just release it. see the tone arm moving parts. There's the lubrication here that's lacking. This part's pretty loose anyway. The difficult part for the record player can be this part here, which is ramping up. Let's take a different view of it here. So this ramping part is the part that's causing the tone arm to lift and set down. Of course, it would be this way: lift and set down. So, as this whole piece here, as that big wheel turns, the big geared wheel turns, this whole piece will move back and forth, and this ramping part will go over top of this spring-loaded pin, which, when you push the pin down, it simply pushes up the tone arm. Right down in here, in fact. Spring here, for some reason. Okay. This is the on-off switch is over here, and this non-conductive lever or shaft, whatever you want to call it, is coming out and contacting here, and this is what makes the on-off switch operate. Sometimes the switch can be sticky or it just doesn't work. And then we have a part here which is similar to this in the sense that there's a ramping kind of thing going on in here, that this piece is going to move. It's going to apply pressure to the spindle, cause the spindle mechanics to operate. And this can also be poorly lubricated, and the added friction is not welcome. It could be the reason why it was stalling out. Okay, so we want to find out what condition the condition is in here. So that's quite lubricated. That's sticky, like a heavy grease, what it feels like. This is dried up here. It's not like a rock, but it's not in the same condition. It could be the different colors here. You see the dark streak. Let me put the camera back up in the air here. The darkness of it could kind of indicate it's a different kind of lubricant. You can imagine in a manufacturing environment they have, engineers have carefully selected what lubricant to use where. So different lubricants used here and there. Not so critical at this point in the machine's life. So oil or grease is really the only two issues. So this stuff you wouldn't really have to remove, but I will remove as much as I can. This stuff is a bit of a problem because it's really dried on there. It doesn't wipe right off. And we have this part here. This is dried up completely. So that's a state of affairs. Not completely dry, but not so good. Now if you look close, this might not come across in the camera very well, but you can imagine that in the manufacturing process, somebody with grease, a little grease can, and a paintbrush is dabbing the grease on. You can see right in here, they've brushed grease here. They've brushed grease in here. You can see the brush strokes from it. Grease brushed here. It's important to note those things because that tells you where to lubricate them. Now you can hunt down instructions. I'm sure there's instructions. I haven't even taken a look myself yet on the internet, and they'll tell you in detail where things should be lubricated, but it's kind of obvious when you look at it. The primary thing is you don't want to lubricate this little push bar here. Probably not the end of the world if it gets some on it, but it's not intended to be lubricated. Because the lubrication has a stickiness factor, and this bar is trying to be pushed by the needle traveling in the groove. That's where the power is coming from. Like, how much power do you want to draw from the needle? The needle is sitting in the groove of the record. Here's my needle. Here's my groove. Right? You want it to be down like this. something like that. And if you begin to draw power from it, mechanical power from it, it's going to tend to want to come up one side, right? So you got to get the pressure and the push on it. So you want the amount of mechanical takeoff to be absolutely minimum. That's why they don't lubricate this part. And maybe initially a light lubricant wouldn't do anything, but in the long run, it's, look what's happening. Okay, no surprise here. Things like this need to be lubricated because look, it's right onto the deck surface. A little tricky to get the lubrication under it, but we won't have a problem. So what I'm going to do is get my very friendly WD-40 here. And we're going to hit some of these spots. A little bit generous. These are all spots where you can see that there's lubricant. More or less a cleaning fluid at this point. A solvent. Okay, so here's a spot you might not recognize. I mean, we can't see the mechanism operating right now, so we don't know what to expect. But see all the lubricant in here? Somebody's taken the brush and gone wacko. So the WD-40, if you don't do anything more than just what I just did now, it's going to wake up the grease that's there, bring it back to life. That's probably enough. We'll try to put some more grease onto it, of course. Down here, there's some down here. Okay, just probably a 10-second operation to lubricate something like this in the factory. Done. Would they apply oil anywhere in here? Good question. Maybe not. So let's spin it around here. Pull this out here. So this funny shaped piece here is getting thicker and thicker as you go. It's shaped in waves because it's going to stop at each spot. Here's the lever to operate it. If you watch this relative to that, you can see the height change happening. So I'm feeling this as I push it with my finger on the far side. And it moves. But for sure, it needs a little lubrication in there too. So I'm just gonna loosen up what's there first. I could do this with any kind of solvent you happen to be enamored by. I mentioned before I like alcohol because I think it's harmless. Other solvents, not so harmless. For me, for a person being here doing this. Okay. You can see a brush mark. Actually, it looks like a dab. Looks like you just whacked it there. Some of this might leak through the front. I hope not. Because gravity is going to be pulling it down through the machine. So here's an edge that probably travels on something. Yeah, you can see this edge here. So those things need to be lubricated. I'm just feeling it. It feels pretty good actually. But hit that with some glue. Now did this come back all the way? So this lever I'm pointing at is part of this funny shaped arm coming over here, and it's the part that pushes on the switch. So I will push the lever, and that allows me to feel the deal. And can you see it's moving, and I let go, and it just kind of slowly oozes its way back. I can see very thick, pasty looking lubrication in here. So the WD-40 needs some time to really work. And work is a word. You need to work this a little bit to loosen it all up. So a little better. It's moving a mechanism up in here that this little guy here. Okay, I'm gonna move it some more here. Now, this is very sticky. It's moving a lot of stuff. There's the switch trying to operate there. I would imagine when I let go, it should snap back. It's not snapping back, it's just kind of drifting. Who's at fault for that? This is pretty loose. What is this piece here? Let's take a look above. So we're here. Let's see what we can see. That piece is right here. It's this piece. Tugging over here. You know, we're having traction problems. I don't think I lubricated any of this. Oh, I'm up here now. Sorry about that. So from underneath, from the lever here, the lever's underneath. Push this, pushing this, pulling on this, moving that. So a lot of stuff hooked up here. Oops. Okay, it feels pretty good here. You know, the lever's involved. So, but you see when I snap this back, how this just drifts slowly. So it's gooed up here. It could be right there. Could easily be right in here. So I don't see the lubrication brush marks anywhere up here. I can feel it though. Ooh. See how I can move the mechanism like this and it does the snapback? Pull it all the way here. Not so much. So what is it? Is it this? I'm going to move this to here. That's plenty loose all the time. Just causing the delay here. Feels just fine. Well, I guess it's possible when it gets back into this position, there just isn't much pulling it further at that point. Since we're having traction problems, I'm concerned about the strength of the contact here between the intermediate wheel and the capstan and the rim inside the record player. really okay, but good enough for now. Let's unstick this guy a little more. He's pretty stuck. So I'm just examining all the contact points. There's one I didn't do, I don't think. That's on a different lever. Moving freer. Awfully generous amount of lubricant shoved on here. Like they were concerned that it remained lubricated. I don't know. Did I hit it with this? I don't think I did. Oop. Okay, now we're going to start removing the old lubrication, especially this. Move the tone arm, let it hang here. The only way to get this to go into another position is to turn that big geared wheel. So I'm going to reach under, turn that. Exactly what just fell off, but something did. The spindle dropped out. Now the underside here. So the ramp contact pin, if you like, is here. This is all free under here, so I can get under there, and not with my finger though. What I do is I make my own little Q-tip here. Ugh, look at that. Clean up under here. I want this to be minimal friction through here. Gotta use your imagination a little bit now and then because you can't see certain parts. You have to just kind of imagine how things are going together. Out of sight. Does that turn the wheel? Yeah, that turns the wheel. That's very nice. The mechanism's moving very nice. Spin the wheel, the geared wheel from up here. Now you can see the tone arm. Can't see the tone arm. The tone arm's swinging around when I do this. That's why I took the cartridge out. I don't have to worry about damaging it. I'm looking close. What all is moving here? Is there anything I missed? So of course this whole thing is pivoting on a shaft. A lot of complications right down in here with the mechanics. The interesting thing about these record players is as they operate, when they go to move the tone arm, the main mechanism has to kind of grab hold of the tone arm and do it. But when it's time to play the record, the mechanism has to release entirely from the tone arm, so the tone arm has the least amount of mechanical stuff going on with it. And that's part of what's going on with these. So I'm sure there's lots of people, perhaps you, have one of these kind of record players, maybe not a Garrard, maybe a different make. They're not identical, but the approach is similar, and you see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go. Garrard has the big wheel. Others have other methods. I don't have any intention of taking this apart. I think for me that would be almost a suicidal move, taking all this apart now. Some people, I think, they'll actually dip this into solvent. They'll just soak the whole thing in solvent. And there's lots of ways to do it. There's no real right and wrong way to do these things, in my view anyway. Can't do too much harm with lubricant, except that one part I've referred to a number of times. And, you know, what kind of injury would this thing suffer if you got oil on this piece? Not much, maybe in the long run, but not in the short term. You certainly wouldn't want to put grease on it. But if you got a little side spray from your WD-40, it's not the end of the world. Some of this old stuff off here. Might be a couple of parts that someone might be inclined to remove, not the whole thing, but just to get better access. And yeah, go ahead. But I tend to stay away from that as much as I can. Drive my wife nuts with paper towel. I mean, of course, like everybody, we have paper towel in our kitchen here and there. When I go to use it, I'll rip off a strip, a full-size strip, but then I'll rip off a tiny piece of the strip, and I'll go ahead and do what I'm doing to try to save on paper. And I live in Canada. It's not like there's a shortage of paper here. Yeah, it makes sense doing this work. You just have a little piece. Okay, it's getting pretty clean now. Of course, by now the hints that I found in here on, where the grease goes and that, I've wiped them away. But to me, it's pretty obvious what it is you need to put grease on. Is this going to solve our problem? I think no. I think the problem is poor traction. The reason the mechanism didn't follow through properly or as easy as it could. This isn't helping these kinds of things here. They're not well lubricated, but we're going to be looking at the traction again. There's another piece here that's running against this spring-loaded part. This is the record size detector. So it looks like what it's doing, when the record comes down and swings this lever out of the way, it strikes the lever and swings it, a small piece of metal is being moved in here and probably becomes a stop. You can see that this piece has funny little zigzags cut in it. Can you see that? As teeth or different spots. And those probably, that's probably the 12-inch record. I'm not sure. And that's probably for the 12-inch record. And this is probably the, this is all messed up here. Probably the 10-inch, something like that's going on. And the 45. 7-inch? 7-inch? Is that what the 45s are? This has lubrication here. Is that what that is? It's almost like paint. Why wouldn't you lubricate that? So instead of being a perfectly flat surface here, there's a small ramp. This is sliding over the top of the ramp. I don't know if you can see it, but as it slides over the ramp, it's doing this motion. It's tipping a little bit. Why? I don't know. Okay, and these record players were developed over decades, and they contain little tiny tricks. It might be hard to appreciate. Exactly why they made things the way they made them. Another thing to think about, I guess, is this is upside down now, and some parts are going to be hanging this way, when normally it's right side up. The parts are hanging upwards. So things might not engage, especially these really loose guys. They may not engage properly when they're upside down like this. I'm not saying that's the case, it's just something to think about. Now what about this shaft here? So that's the pivot shaft right under here, right under my finger. I don't see any evidence of lubrication. This may be another case where not to lubricate this, maybe a bearing, especially designed bearing to give a minimum drag on the tone arm as it goes across the record. Another thing that's done in these record players is they're designed so that if somebody blocks the tone arm during its movement, the machine doesn't explode on you. Somehow it's safe for that. An example of that would be the contact between this shaft and the ramp here is just a contact like this. So if you slide it yourself, that's not going to happen. But if you were to slide it inappropriately or something, that's not the best example. No damage will occur because sooner or later somebody's going to block the tone arm while it's operating automatically. These are probably all hard lessons learned from earlier designs that got into trouble, because the people who own these things can abuse them by accident. That's a pretty loosey-goosey part there, but it's how it's designed. That must be why they just loaded it with grease. Okay, now some of my WD-40 is running around in here, a little bit of excess. Here with a spring. And what exactly that's doing, I don't know, but it seems to move quite freely. Okay, next thing we're going to pay attention to now is the motor lower bearing. So I did mention that it's upside down. Certainly one part that goes into a inappropriate, might be the right word, inappropriate position is the motor rotor, which is normally sitting in this cup, kind of in this cup, or the bearing is inside this cup. This is a very precision sort of thing, but it is designed to be maintained. Designed to be taken off. We're going to do that. Oh my gosh. Yikes. Let's try the screwdriver. Better bite. Very good. This is too small, I think. Yeah. Wow. Okay, maybe a chance we're not going to get this off. So it feels like it wants to. The screwdriver wants to cam out. Wow. Darn Phillips screws. There's many different tips on these star screwdrivers, and you really want to use exactly the right screwdriver. And I'm Canadian, so this star thing doesn't work well with me. Put a nice Robert's head there. This would be off already. Let's go back. This is probably the best screwdriver. Getting worn down. Motor's running pretty good. So, it's lifting up. One thing about removing these screws, that sometimes they go down into a threaded fitting. Other times they go down into a nut. If they go down into a nut, it can be challenging to get this back together again. Not impossible. This one just feels like this. Maybe this has been done before. It feels like there's no grip. It just wants to cam upwards. How many screwdrivers have I got? not many more. Once in a while you can stick a flathead in there, but not too often. Try this. I think I'm just trying to. They're all doing it. They're going. The point is too sharp, going down too deep. I got it. Just putting a lot of pressure on it. This motor's one chance to get maintained. I don't think he's going to be upside down on somebody's bench for years and years after this. So there it goes. Okay. Just got muscular with it. These ones are going down into threaded fittings, so I don't have to worry about the nut problem, which can be very hard to get at. Maybe they lock these down pretty tight because it's a vibrating motor. Okay, we'll just lift this straight up. There we go. Now often there's a ball bearing sitting inside here. You lift it up and ball bearing gone. Other times this shaft it's shaped with a point or a ball point. Ball point? Ball point. This fitting here is also designed to swivel a little bit. Not that it needs to do that while the record player is operating. It needs to do that when you put it back together. Where's my little screwdriver? There he is. You're going to see how loose it is by just trying to move it. So it moves very easy. Well, that tells me the lubricant's not frozen in there. It's the same as the rest of the player, I imagine. We're going to give it a little bit of WD-40 to loosen things up. The ball can fall out at any time. It's a small ball bearing if there's one in there. Out it comes, and then it's on the floor. Unless you hear the tink tink, you may not even know it's gone. Can we see in there? I'll take a look. Well, I can't say I can see one in there. I don't want to scratch it up or anything like that, but we can poke around a little bit. I just need to find something to poke with. Wow, that's an interesting shape. Well, I don't feel a ball in there. Nothing coming out. So normally the rotor here, which has some play, some distance to move, is sitting. The weight of this is pushing on this. This is why this is such an important bearing. Sure looks like there's been a ball in there. Could it be missing already? Not very likely. I'm almost certainly the first guy to ever take this motor apart. Okay, we'll just be very careful not to accidentally dump it out, and away it goes. Now if you look at the rotor, you can see this drill mark on it, a goldy drill mark, and that's a balancing effort that was done in the factory on the rotor. Now I'm turning it, and I'm feeling a fair bit of resistance, but it's not in its normal position. It's upside down. Normally it's up here a little bit. Don't know what I'm proving by doing any of this. It doesn't seem to move very freely, but I think that's a false impression I'm getting. So you can't do too much else with the motor itself. Okay, so I'm going to stop for just a minute, take a little break. Put the motor back together, we'll put everything back together, flip it over, we'll give it another test, and we'll start dealing with the traction issue if it's still there. I imagine it's still there. Oh my gosh, that's 50 minutes already. Okay, coffee break is over. Sitting in front of my TV, we get BBC News on our TV here in Canada, on the cable. And there's a program, I've listened to it on the radio. I'm gonna be greasing up stuff while I talk here. Listen on the radio, and now I can see it on the TV, called Hard Talk. My hat's off to that program and the fellow, I don't know his name, who you usually hear on it. Hard Talk. Those are really excellent interviews. And just like the name implies, you go on that program to be interviewed, you are going to have to explain yourself in spades, that's for sure. Fantastic. So just generally speaking, BBC, fantastic. If you're in Britain, I mean, you're BBC saturated, so maybe you don't think too much about it. But here in Canada, we have our own version of it, the CBC. Very dutiful operation, if I can put it that way. I think most Canadians, any Canadians who pay attention to CBC actually love it. It's CBC TV and CBC radio, they're quite different. The radio is fully funded by government. The TV, when I was a kid, was forced into funding through advertisement, which unfortunately changed the nature of CBC TV quite a bit, and not particularly a good way in many cases. But the CBC radio is different. You don't have to kowtow to advertisers and stuff like that. So if you're British or English, I don't know which word to use. If you're in the UK, I don't know. I think I've said this before. Thank you very much for the BBC. Keep paying your taxes happily and sharing. I believe BBC International is commercial. I think they put ads on. I'm not sure now. But in the United States, there's PBS. But that's certainly not a government operation. And the CBC and the BBC are not government operations, although they receive funding. There was a period, maybe quite a while ago, maybe 30 years ago, where there was a push in Canada to get rid of the CBC. Why do we have to pay our $12 a year for that? Thank God that didn't work out. I think most Canadians would be horrified if the CBC weren't around. I think it provides a foundation of broadcast behavior that the private operations can't go screwy as they can in the States. We've seen them go screwy in the States. Stop trying to serve the listeners and just concentrate on serving themselves. Kind of corral their audiences instead of serving them. And not to say too much, I think you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. There are a lot of wonderful things about the United States. And if you got to pick a country that's going to push the world around, the way I look at it is like this. It's like 200 countries or so in the world. I think of them like a pack of 200 dogs. Big dogs, small dogs, loud dogs, quiet dogs, dogs you never see. There's always a few at the head of the pack. And there's always one right at the front, the lead dog in the world. And that's been the United States. Now, there's other big dogs nipping at its heels. But the lead dog has been the United States, and I think the world has benefited hugely from that. In the past. And the last American government, the previous administration, kind of tried to shut all that down, tried to just walk away, just go sit under a bush somewhere and let the other dogs fight it out, kind of. But I don't think the other dogs are really in the mood for fighting very much. It's not clear who would become the new lead dog. Not right at this point in time, anyway. In my view, what we see the Americans doing now, if you're American, what I think your country is doing now is trying to get back to the head of the pack. And many of the smaller dogs, like the Canadian dog, well, okay, that's fine. Get up there and do your thing. As long as your thing is kind of like what it was. You know, nothing is uniform. Everything is complicated. So, you know, in some cases, I think if you're in South America, you might be, you know, just, what are you talking about, Jim? The Americans have not been our friend. Well, I don't think that's so much the American system, the American government, or the American population. I think that's certain Americans. Through the history of South America is kind of sad in many ways. I mean, I did say it's a pack of dogs, didn't I? You know, dogs use their teeth. they growl and fight amongst themselves. I don't think a pack of dogs does well when they can't tell who's in charge. Wolves. You could use the word. You could say wolves. That might even be better way of looking at it. Okay, I'm probably missing a bunch of spots here because I've been talking and not thinking so much, paying attention to what I'm doing. Yeah, the world is made up of dogs. I'm just looking at all the things that are moving when I do this. So this switcher, I don't think I want to put any grease or oil on this. But didn't it fail to stop? Right when it was supposed to turn off? Okay, if you notice I've left the bearing off, that's because I'm going to put oil in the bearing, and once I turn it over and put it back on, the oil is going to start running up the shaft here. So I want to get it back together and then flip the whole thing over again. So I want that to be my last operation. Big wheel now. So part of defeating the poor traction situation is trying to reduce the friction back here as much as possible. So by turning the wheel by hand, I get a direct feeling of you know how well that's going. Feels like it's going pretty good. Now there's going to be a little bit of WD-40 left in there. A lot of it will have evaporated away. A lot of the volatile components will have evaporated away. A thin film be left. That's good. Mixing it in with the grease, it's good stuff. I think I need to put a little more in here, because there's a lot of play in this part. missed this part right here. Catching on a little tooth there. Needs a little grease down there. Put some right on that edge. Don't know how effective this really is when you got like a sharp edge against a sharp edge, but I don't think it can hurt. Okay, did I miss anything serious? You can see the wire here. There's 4 wires and they're very, very fine wires. And they're really taking care of all that well. They're just kind of hanging loose in there. But I think that's just fine. Okay, one last look. I think we're good. You just let me know if I miss something. Okay. Motor bearing. Lower motor bearing. Just make sure this is. Ooh, there's the whole motor move. Hey, oh, that's because I got the screws out. So a lot of these motors are mounted on rubber mounts. You can see a rubber mount here. I almost forgot to mention this. There's 3 rubber mounts here. They're in good shape. And some of these record players, you can't see it because of the wire. Some of these record players, there's a rubber mount right there. The rubber mount will give out. It will compress just from the weight of the motor over a long period of time and basically give up the ghost. And this causes the motor to sit in a different inappropriate position. So the spindle on the end of the rotor here is in the wrong position. And when you go to change the speed, instead of the intermediate wheel striking the spindle in the right spot to get the right speed, it will strike in the wrong spot. Sometimes it'll actually hit it right where there's a difference in the spindle. You get some weird effects, speed effects. Okay, now we're going to put some oil in here. This is where the motor oil comes in. Here, motor oil. Not a lot. Not filling this or anything like that. Just one little drop. Oop, there we go. I mentioned before that this whole piece slides around a bit. It's going to find its proper angle. So it meets up with the shaft just perfectly. And I think this is perfectly symmetrical. I don't think there's a left or a right. The screws are right there. On you go. Okay, I'll try to do this fairly quickly. Oily fingers. There's a top bearing fitting there. It looks like it came loose also when I took the screw out. Didn't really realize that. There we go. So I imagine that the torque rating for these screws is pretty high considering how hard it was to get them off. I'm going to muscle them in. get your finger jabbed. There we go. Okay. I'm sweating a bit. Okay, let's flip it over. This green wire kind of got... Ooh, that looks terrible, eh? How'd this green wire get that messed up there? Ooh, that's way up there. It's okay though. Lock it in place. I want the neutral part over here though. Go. Look at my greased up fingers here. Throw on the platter. When the record's in the proper stop position, like you're done with it for the day, the platter should do that. Just spin freely. If it's still engaging with the intermediate wheel, it won't spin freely, and that means the intermediate wheel is pressed up against something, and it's going to get a flat spot again. That seems pretty good. Okay, are we ready to try a record? I didn't do anything with this. I don't think I... Oh yeah, look at that. That's a filthy mess. This needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but I'm going to skip that. Just put a little finger oil on it for now. Put them in. Interesting, so there's a flat side to this. What about that flat side? Pretty sticky. I don't think that's down. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. That's better. Okay, apparently the flat side on the spindle and the flat side on the shaft, but they don't match. They're opposite each other. These things are often kind of loose, but this doesn't feel right at all. Okay, not to sweat over that just yet. Maybe it'll drop in as we go. I don't know. Oop. Throw on the record. Yeah, something's not right here. So dwell on this. I just want to check the traction is what I'm interested in. Maybe the mechanism's in some funny position under there. After all that fooling around, maybe once around it'll be okay. So the weight is missing here. I'm going to put this back on to give it the proper weight. This guy. Yikes. I think this ring is plastic. I'm worried about it. Maybe I opened it up a little too far last time. It is possible to ruin one of these just by breaking one part. And most of it's pretty rugged, but plastic part like that, yeah. Don't break those things. Okay, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's find out. See how it goes, and then that'll be the end of today's efforts. Whatever the problems that remain, that'll be for tomorrow, along with dealing with the cartridge and needle and all that stuff too. Power on. Sound silent. Lock off. Record on. Let's put a record on. Yeah, this isn't right. You shouldn't be able to easily drop the record. You should be able to drop it, but not easily. Something not right. Okay, let's skip the record. As long as the overarm is up in the air, the machine thinks there's a record being dropped, so it'll attempt to play it. Manual. We're on 16 here. 33. Looks like 33 to me. Traction check. Better, but that's really not very good. Just judging from my experience. What do we hear? We hear something. Tick, 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 tick. Okay, here we go. Ready to catch it. Well, I made it past it. Oh. So we probably solved the friction problems, but we still have weak traction. Making nice sounds. Made it past again. See, it thinks there's a record being dropped every time. Okay, so we're going to now tell it there's no more records. What are you going to do this time? Woo! Woo. Fantastic. Shut itself off. Okay, so we're going to have to deal with the traction problem. There's a couple of approaches for that. We'll deal with it tomorrow. And then attend to the cartridge, including listening to it. And there we go. Coming along nicely. Thanks a lot for watching today, and we'll see you tomorrow.